Her apron was stained, her wallet nearly empty. Yet when the frail old man whispered, "I haven't eaten in days," she slid a warm plate toward him without hesitation. She never imagined that kindness would rewrite her destiny and capture the heart of a man who had forgotten how to love. The late afternoon sun poured weakly through the diner's smudged windows, painting streaks of light across chipped linoleum floors. The old neon sign outside flickered with a tired hum, just like the woman moving swiftly behind the counter. Emma's hair was pinned up hastily, tendrils slipping loose as she refilled a coffee pot. She plastered on the same polite smile she had worn for the last 8 hours, though her eyes betrayed the exhaustion behind it. The diner was half empty, just a trucker nodding over his plate and a young couple tucked into a booth whispering between bites. Emma's steps dragged slightly, but she hid it well. In her pocket was a folded electricity bill she hadn't dared open during her shift. She already knew what it said. The truth followed her everywhere. She was working double shifts, scraping tips into envelopes, yet never quite catching up. Still, when she paused to adjust the sugar dispensers at the table, she hummed under her breath, some old tune her mother used to sing. She had learned long ago that kindness was easier to give than to receive, and so she gave it freely, even if no one noticed. Across town, another life unfolded in a tower of glass. Gabriel Pierce, CEO of Pierce Industries, leaned over a mahogany desk, his gaze cutting through the sleek expanse of contracts and quarterly reports. His office overlooked the city skyline, but the view didn't soften him. It was a fortress of polished steel and spotless order, reflecting the man who sat inside it. At 40, Gabriel was the sort of man who commanded silence when he entered a room. Sharp navy suit, gold cufflinks, not a single hair out of place. His phone buzzed with updates. Assistants spoke in clipped tones, and every minute of his schedule was accounted for. Yet in the rare moments when no one else was present, the mask slipped just slightly. He would glance at a photo on the far shelf, one he never let anyone touch. It was small, framed in wood, showing a much younger Gabriel with his father's arm draped over his shoulders. Both were smiling in that captured second. The photo gathered more dust each year. Gabriel hadn't spoken to his father in over a decade. The rift had begun as a disagreement, then sharpened into silence, then calcified into a wall neither seemed willing to break. Pride had done the rest. "Mr. Pierce, your 5 o'clock is waiting," came his assistant's voice through the intercom. He straightened, sliding the mask back on. "Send them in." The city thrived below, but Gabriel felt none of its pulse. Success was his constant companion, yet emptiness trailed him like a shadow. Back at the diner, the door creaked open, letting in a gust of cool evening air and a man who might have been invisible anywhere else. He shuffled inside slowly, clothes hanging off his frame, his face gaunt with hunger and years of hardship. His shoes were worn thin, soles nearly separating. The trucker glanced briefly, then looked back to his food. The young couple didn't notice him at all. Emma noticed. Her gaze flicked up instinctively, softening when she saw the tremor in his hands as he gripped the doorframe for balance. He hesitated, as though unsure if he belonged there. "Evening," she said gently, her voice carrying across the empty space. "Sit wherever you like." He nodded faintly, eyes darting to the booths, then settling on the counter. With slow, careful steps, he lowered himself onto a stool. He folded his hands, as if bracing himself for rejection. Emma walked over, setting a menu in front of him. "Coffee." The man cleared his throat, voice rough. I don't have..." He trailed off, eyes dropping to his hands. Shame burned across his weathered face. Emma's heart clenched. She didn't need him to finish the sentence. Without a word, she poured the coffee, the rich aroma filling the space between them. Then she reached for the pot of chicken soup, simmering on the stove, and ladled it into a bowl. She slid it in front of him with a soft smile. His eyes widened, glassy with gratitude. "Miss, I can't pay." "Don't worry about it," she said quickly, cutting him off with warmth. "Just eat. Everyone deserves a hot meal." He lifted the spoon with trembling fingers, sipping slowly as though savoring not just the flavor, but the dignity of the moment. Emma turned away, busying herself at the counter, but her chest ached as she watched him from the corner of her eye. Outside, the neon sign buzzed louder and the sky shifted to twilight. The world hurried on, indifferent. But inside that little diner, something small and powerful had just taken root. Emma didn't know it yet. Neither did Gabriel, as he strode out his tower of glass into a waiting car. But this single act of kindness, quiet, unremarkable to everyone else, was about to entangle all their lives, pulling them toward love, forgiveness, and redemption. If you were in Emma's shoes, would you have served a man even knowing you might lose your job for it? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear how far you go for kindness. The diner had grown quieter as the sun sank deeper, shadows pooling in the corners. Emma leaned against the counter, wiping her hands on her apron, but her eyes kept drifting toward the old man hunched over his bowl of soup. He ate slowly, as though each bite had to be coaxed past years of hunger. His spoon rattled against the ceramic from the tremor in his hand. Sometimes he paused between sips, staring at the steam as if it carried memories no one else could see. Emma busied herself with restocking napkins, though in truth she was watching. There was something in the way he lifted his shoulders, then dropped them as though weighed down by more than just years. Finally, she slid onto the stool a few seats down. "Soup okay?" she asked softly. The man blinked, as though startled that she was still speaking to him. It's the best thing I've tasted in a long time." His voice cracked around the edges, like an old record. "Thank you." Emma smiled. "Glad to hear it. My boss says it's too salty, but I think comfort food's supposed to be that way." He gave a faint chuckle, then quickly wiped his mouth with the back of his sleeve. Emma caught the motion and discreetly slid a napkin toward him. "You from around here?" she asked, tone casual, though her curiosity flickered behind her eyes. The man hesitated. "Once," he said, his gaze dropping to the soup. "Long ago." He spooned another bite, swallowing before adding, "Not anymore." Emma nodded, sensing the boundary. She didn't press. She'd met enough people passing through town to know that sometimes silence told a louder story. Instead, she poured him more coffee. "Well, you're here tonight. That counts for something." He looked at her then, really looked at her. There was surprise in his eyes, as though he hadn't expected kindness, hadn't expected to be seen. For a long moment, neither spoke. The diner clock ticked above them, the hum of the neon sign filling the silence. Then the door swung open. A pair of young men stepped in, laughing loudly, their boots stomping against the tile. They tossed themselves into a booth, oblivious of the fragile piece at the counter. Emma went to take their orders, jotting them quickly, but her mind kept drifting back. By the time she returned, the elder had nearly finished the soup. He sat straighter now, warmth coloring his face. The years hadn't left him, but for a moment they didn't seem as heavy. When he pushed the empty bowl forward, Emma whisked it away. "You want seconds?" He blinked. "I told you I can't." "Not what I asked." Emma cut in gently. "Do you want some cons?" His lips pressed together, eyes stinging with something unshed. He nodded once. She filled the bowl again without hesitation. When she placed it in front of him, he whispered, "Why?" Emma paused. "Because you're hungry." That simple. His voice was rough, laced with disbelief. Emma tilted her head. "Does it need be more complicated?" The man's throat bobbed as he swallowed. For a moment, she thought he might cry, but instead he gripped the spoon tighter and bent over the bowl. As he ate, Emma leaned back against the counter, her own chest tightening. She thought of nights she'd skipped dinner to pay rent, of mornings she'd walked to work in worn-out shoes because a new pair wasn't in the budget. She knew what it meant to feel invisible, to need help and be too proud to ask. So when she saw him, she saw herself. Across town, Gabriel Pierce sat in the back of his sleek black car as it cruised through traffic. His assistant spoke quickly from the front seat about meetings and projections, but Gabriel's gaze was fixed on the city flashing past his window. He caught sight of a familiar corner, a diner's flickering sign. Something tugged at him, unbidden, but he shook it off. The car drove on. Back at the counter, the old man had finished his second bowl. He set the spoon down with a sigh that was both weary and full. His hands rested on the counter, thin fingers marked with calluses from a different life. Emma cleared the bowl, then hesitated. You need anything else? He looked at her, really looked, and said in a whisper, You remind me of someone. Her brow furrowed. Oh, my son, he said finally. His voice cracked again, but this time with something heavier than age. He used to look at me the way you did just now, like I was worth something. Emma's chest squeezed. Where is he now? The man stared into his empty cup of coffee, lips pressed tight. Far away, he said. Farther than I ever thought. Silence stretched between them. Emma didn't pry. Instead, she refilled the cup, letting the steam rise like a fragile offering. He accepted it with trembling hands. For a moment, the neon glow through the windows softened, and the world outside felt irrelevant. Inside this small diner, a fragile thread had been woven, two souls stitched together by the simplest, purest act of kindness. Neither of them knew that somewhere across the city, the son he spoke of was staring out his office window, restless and unaware of how close destiny had drawn. Do you believe a small act of kindness can change the entire course of someone's life? Share a time when kindness, either given or received, left a mark you'll never forget. The diner was nearly empty when the bell over the door jingled again. Emma glanced up, expecting another regular or maybe a late-night traveler. Instead, the man who entered seemed entirely out of place. Tall, broad-shouldered, his suit jacket tailored to perfection, Gabriel Pierce carried the air of someone who never had to wait for a table. The neon light caught the steel of his wristwatch, expensive enough to cover a month of Emma's rent. Emma's instinct was immediate. He doesn't belong here. The elder stiffened at the counter. His spoon clattered against the bowl, the tremor in his hands worsening. Gabriel's eyes landed on him, sharp and unyielding. For a second, something flickered there, shock, recognition, anger, and then a hardened. He stepped forward, shoes clicking against the linoleum. Dad. The word came out clipped, almost accusing. Emma froze mid-wipe, cloth in her hand. Her gaze darted between the two men. The resemblance was faint, softened by years and distance, but undeniable. The old man, Robert, shifted uncomfortably. Gabriel, he murmured, voice thick with something Emma couldn't name. You shouldn't be here, Gabriel said. His tone was low, controlled, but the edges cut sharp. Robert's shoulders hunched, as though trying to make himself smaller. I was just hungry. Gabriel's jaw clenched. He turned his gaze on Emma, and for the first time she felt the weight of being sized up by someone who thought in ledgers and assets. You fed him. His voice was flat, but beneath it was accusation. Emma straightened, refusing to shrink under his stare. Yes, he came in hungry. That's what people do in diners. They eat. Gabriel's mouth twitched, something between disdain and disbelief. Do you know who he is? Emma's brows furrowed. A man who needed a meal. That's all I need to know. Robert's eyes flickered between them, guilt swimming in the lines of his face. Gabriel, don't. But Gabriel ignored him, his gaze locked on Emma. You don't know what you involve yourself in. Emma felt a spark of anger. I didn't involve myself in anything. I served soup. Forgive me if that's offensive in your world. The words hung in the air, sharp and unyielding. For a moment, silence. The diner clock ticked too loudly. The young men in the booth glanced over, sensing the tension, but quickly turned back to their fries. Gabriel finally exhaled, as though wrestling his temper down. He turned back to Robert. You shouldn't be here. You should have called me. Robert's voice cracked. Would you have answered? The question landed like a stone dropped into deep water. Gabriel's expression hardened further. You don't understand the position you've put yourself in. Emma stepped in, unable to keep quiet. With all due respect, the only position he was in was hungry. That's not a crime. Gabriel turned to her again, his eyes narrowing. You don't know this man. You don't know what he's done. Emma held her ground. And you don't know me. But here we are. For the briefest moment, their gazes locked, his cold calculation against a quiet defiance. Neither moved, neither blinked. Robert broke the silence, pushing back from the counter. Enough. His voice trembled, but it held authority. Emma, thank you. You didn't have to, but you did. That means more than you know. He turned to his son, eyes tired. And Gabriel, maybe she sees something you've forgotten how to see. Gabriel's throat worked as though he wanted to speak, but no words came. Instead, he reached into his wallet and pulled out a crisp bill, sliding it onto the counter. For her trouble, Emma bristled. That's not necessary. It wasn't a suggestion, Gabriel said coldly. Emma picked up the bill and pressed it back into his hand. Her fingers brushed his, but her voice stayed firm. Kindness isn't a transaction. Not here. His jaw tightened, eyes narrowing again. But instead of responding, he pocketed the money and turned on his heel. Come on, Dad. Robert hesitated, torn. His gaze lingered on Emma, gratitude shining in his eyes, before he finally stood and shuffled toward the door. The bell jingled as they left, the echo lingering long after the door shut. Emma stood behind the counter, heart pounding. Her hands trembled slightly, though she clenched cloth tighter to hide it. She wasn't sure what just happened, but she knew one thing. She had just stepped into something far bigger than a bowl of soup. Outside, Gabriel's car waited at the curb. He opened the door for his father, helping him in despite the storm between them. His face remained unreadable, but inside, 1,000 unspoken words churned. Back inside, Emma exhaled slowly, whispering to herself, What have I gotten into? If you were Emma, would you have stood your ground against Gabriel, or stayed silent to avoid conflict? Comment below. Whose side would you be on at this moment? The night after Gabriel stormed into the diner, Emma thought about the encounter far longer than she cared to admit. She replayed his clipped tone, his dismissive glance, the way he had treated his father like a burden rather than a human being. But what stuck with her most was Robert's eyes, the deep gratitude when she set that bowl in front of him, and the way his shoulders slumped when Gabriel appeared. By the time she crawled into bed in her small apartment above the laundromat, she was exhausted. Still, she whispered into the silence, I'd do it again. 2 days later, fate made the choice for her. It was mid-morning, the diner buzzing with a small rush of customers, when the door swung open again. Robert shuffled in, slower than before, his steps uneven. Emma smiled instinctively, relief softening her face. Back again, she said warmly, guiding him to a booth. But something was wrong. His color was pale, his breathing shallow. When she brought him a glass of water, his hand trembled so badly he spilled half of it on the table. Mr. Robert? She asked, worry creeping in. He tried to wave her off. Just tired. Moments later, he slumped forward. Somebody call 911. Emma's voice cut through the chatter. She rushed to his side, easing him against a booth while customers scrambled for their phones. The minutes stretched painfully long until the ambulance arrived. Emma climbed in without hesitation, gripping Robert's frail hand as paramedics worked. Ma'am, are you family? One of them asked. She hesitated, then shook her head. No, but I'm not leaving him alone. When they reached the hospital, she stayed. Hours blurred together in the antiseptic waiting room. White walls, the buzz of fluorescent lights, the faint smell of disinfectant clinging to her clothes. Then the sharp click of polished shoes echoed down the hall. Emma looked up to see Gabriel striding in, tension carved across his features. His gaze landed on her, surprise flashing before it hardened again. What are you doing here? His voice was low, sharp. Emma stood. I was with him when it happened. I wasn't just leave. You should have. His words cut, but beneath them was a flicker of something else. Guilt. Fear. I couldn't. For a long moment, they stared at each other, the sterile hum of the hospital surrounding them. Finally, Gabriel exhaled, running a hand down his face. How is he? Emma shook her head. They're running tests. He collapsed. He wasn't well when he came in this morning. Gabriel pressed his lips together, his jaw tight. He looked older in that moment, the sharp edges of his authority blunted by worry. When a nurse entered and asked for family, Gabriel immediately stepped forward. I'm his son. The nurse's eyes flicked to Emma. And you are... Emma hesitated, but before she could answer, Gabriel cut in. No one. She's leaving. Emma's cheeks flushed hot, anger rising. Excuse me? Gabriel turned, voice lowering but no less cold. You've done enough. This is a private matter. Emma's fists clenched at her sides. Done enough? He collapsed to my diner. I held his hand while you weren't here. So if you think you can just dismiss me, why are you really here? Gabriel interrupted, eyes narrowing. What do you want? Money? Gratitude? A story to tell. The words stung more than she expected. Emma blinked, swallowing hard. Not everything is a transaction, Mr. Pierce. Some of us do things because it's right. For the first time, Gabriel's composure cracked. His eyes flickered, guilt flashing before he turned away. The nurse cleared her throat. Visiting hours are limited, only 2 at a time. Emma and Gabriel both spoke at once. I'll stay, Emma said. He's my father, Gabriel snapped. The nurse raised her brows. Then decide quickly. He'll want familiar faces when he wakes up. Silence stretched. Gabriel looked at Emma, his pride warring with something deeper. Finally, he muttered, Fine, stay. But don't think this makes you part of this family. Emma exhaled shakily, but nodded. She wasn't there for Gabriel anyway. Together, they entered the hospital room. Robert lay pale and still against the white sheets, monitors beeping steadily. Emma took the chair on one side, Gabriel on the other. For a long time, they sat in silence, united only by the fragile thread of the old man between them. Emma glanced at Gabriel once, catching the way his hand lingered near his father's, but never touched. It was then she saw it, the crack in his armor. Beneath the arrogance and clipped words was a man terrified of losing what little chance of reconciliation remained. And for the first time, Emma realized they were both bound here, whether they liked it or not. If you were in Emma's place, would you stay by Robert's side despite Gabriel's hostility, or would you walk away to avoid the conflict? Let me know in the comments. What would you do? The hospital room was dim, the blinds drawn against the afternoon sun. Machines beeped softly, steady and relentless, filling the silence between Emma and Gabriel. Robert stirred, his eyelids fluttering. Emma leaned forward, relief softening her face. Gabriel stiffened his chair, shoulders rigid as though bracing for impact. Dad, Gabriel said, his voice low, controlled. Too controlled. Robert's eyes opened slowly, finding his son first. A faint smile flickered, weary but real. You came. Gabriel's jaw clenched. Of course I came. But the words sounded like an obligation rather than comfort. Emma shifted slightly, offering a gentle smile. You scared us, she said softly. Robert's gaze turned to her, and his expression softened. Emma, you stayed. She nodded. Of course. The room fell quiet again, the weight of unspoken words pressing heavily between father and son. Finally, Robert sighed. I suppose it's time. Gabriel frowned. Time for what? To stop pretending that silence fixes anything. His voice was frail, but the edge of resolve sharpened it. Emma glanced between them, sensing the gravity. She stayed quiet, letting the moment unfold. Robert turned his gaze back to Gabriel. You think I left because I didn't care, that I walked away from you, from your mother, because you weren't enough. But that's not the truth. Gabriel's eyes darkened, then enlightened me, because for the last 20 years, that's exactly how it felt. The old man's breath hitched. I lost your mother before I ever lost you. She wanted more than I could give. She wanted wealth, status, comfort. I was a man who worked with my hands, a man who built slowly, too slowly for her dreams. Gabriel's chest rose and fell sharply. She never told me that. She wouldn't, Robert whispered. She wanted you to believe I abandoned you. And I let her. I thought you'd be better off hating me than watching me fail. So I left, not because I stopped loving you, but because I thought it was the only way you'd have a chance at the life she wanted for you. Gabriel sat back, the words sinking like stones. His face betrayed nothing, but Emma could see the flicker in his eyes. Confusion, anger, pain. You were supposed to fight for me, Gabriel said finally, his voice trembling despite his effort to hold it steady. You were supposed to stay. You don't just walk away from your kid. Robert's eyes shone with tears. I know. And that's the choice I regret every single day. The silence that followed was heavy, thick with years of unsaid apologies. Emma swallowed hard. The ache in Robert's voice hit something deep inside her. She thought of her own father, the man who had left when she was 12, vanishing with promises never kept. She had waited by the window for weeks, then months, until waiting itself became a wound that never fully healed. Her voice was quiet when she spoke. Sometimes people think leaving is mercy, but the ones left behind, they carry the weight forever. Both men turned to her. Gabriel's expression softened just slightly, curiosity flickering. "You sound like you know." Emma looked down at her hands, twisting the edge of her apron. "My dad left when I was a kid. My mom worked herself into the ground to keep us afloat. He never came back." Robert's eyes filled with sorrow. "I'm sorry, Emma." She shook her head. "I'm just saying, sometimes the absence is louder than the presence ever was." For a moment, the three of them sat in that fragile space, bound not by blood, but by wounds that echoed each other. Then Gabriel stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. "This changes nothing." His voice was sharp but brittle. "The past is the past." Robert reached out weakly, his hand trembling in the air. "Son." Gabriel stepped back. "Rest. You need your strength." He turned toward the door, but Emma's voice stopped him. "You can't outrun this forever," she said softly. He froze, shoulders tense. Then, without looking back, he walked out, the door swinging shut behind him. Robert's hand fell back to the sheets, his chest rising heavily. He looked at Emma, sadness etched deep into his features. "He thinks strength means silence," Robert murmured. "But silence has stolen too much already." Emma reached for his hand, squeezing gently. Then, maybe it's time someone reminded him. Robert's eyes met hers, weary but hopeful. "You might be the only one who can. Do you believe some wounds from the past can ever truly heal, or do they leave scars we simply learn to live with? Share your thoughts. I'd love to hear your perspective." The hospital cafeteria was nearly empty, the scent of burnt coffee lingering in the air. Emma sat at a corner table, stirring her tea, though it had long gone cold. The events of the day still pulsed in her chest. Robert's confession, Gabriel's abrupt exit, the weight of wounds that spanned decades. She almost didn't notice when Gabriel walked in. His jacket was gone, sleeves rolled his forearms, his usually perfect tie loosened. He looked less like a CEO and more like a man who had been carrying too much for too long. He paused when he spotted her, hesitation flickering in his eyes. Then, with a sigh, he crossed the room and set his tray down across from her. "You're still here," he said flatly. Emma raised an eyebrow. "So, are you—" A corner of his mouth twitched. Almost a smile, but not quite. "Fair point." For a moment, they sat in silence, the hum of the vending machines filling the space. Finally, Emma spoke. "He loves you, you know." Gabriel's jaw tightened. "He left me." "I know." Emma's voice was gentle. "But love doesn't always make sense. Sometimes it fails us. Sometimes it hides under bad choices. But it doesn't mean it's gone." Gabriel stared at his untouched coffee. "You talk like you've forgiven him already." Emma shrugged lightly. "Maybe because I know what it's like to wish for a chance I never got." He looked up then, curiosity breaking through his guarded expression. "Your father?" She nodded, eyes distant. "He left when I was 12. One day, he kissed me on the forehead, said he'd be back in a week. I sat by the window every night waiting. Weeks turned into months, months into years." Her throat tightened, but she forced a small smile. "I stopped waiting eventually, but a part of me still wonders." Gabriel was silent, watching her. For the first time, his expression softened, not pity, but understanding. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. Emma chuckled humorlessly. "Don't be. It made me who I am. Maybe that's why I couldn't let your father eat alone. I know what it's like to feel abandoned." The words settled between them, fragile and raw. Gabriel leaned back, exhaling slowly. "I built everything I have because I swore I'd never be like him. I thought if I worked hard enough, built high enough, I'd never feel that emptiness again. But it's still there." Emma tilted her head. Maybe because you can't build walls high enough to keep out something that lives inside you. His lips curved into a wry smile. You're not afraid to speak your mind, are you? Not when someone needs to hear it. A beat passed, then Gabriel laughed softly. Quiet, unexpected, almost disbelieving. Emma blinked, surprised. It was the first time she had heard him laugh. What? She asked, a smile tugging at her lips. Nothing, he said, shaking his head. It's just, I can't remember the last time someone talked to me like this. Everyone usually wants something from me. Emma leaned forward, chin resting on her hand. And what do you think I want? He studied her, his gaze searching. For once, he didn't seem to have an answer. I don't know, he admitted. And that scares me more than if you just asked for money. Emma laughed, the sound light breaking the heaviness between them. Relax, Mr. Pierce. I don't want anything from you. Gabriel's eyes lingered on her a moment longer. Something shifted there. Curiosity, maybe admiration, though he didn't say it aloud. They sat for another half hour, conversation weaving between silence and small admissions. Emma teased him gently about his stiff posture. Gabriel surprised himself by telling her a childhood story about sneaking into his father's workshop. When Robert stirred awake later that evening, he found them both sitting at his bedside. Emma on one side, Gabriel on the other. The air between them was no longer sharp with tension, but threaded with something softer. Robert's lips curved faintly. You two sound like old friends. Emma smiled. Not sure about old, but maybe friends. Gabriel didn't correct her. As the night wore on, Emma caught herself glancing at him more often, noticing the way the sharp lines of his face softened when he thought no one was watching, the way his hand hovered protectively near his father's without quite touching. And Gabriel found himself listening to the sound of her laughter longer than he meant to, filing it away like something precious he hadn't known he was missing. For the first time since their paths had crossed, they weren't enemies. They weren't strangers. They were two wounded souls, quietly finding that maybe, just maybe, they understood each other more than they had ever expected. Do you think two people from such different worlds, one hardened by wealth, the other softened by struggle, can truly find common ground? Share your thoughts in the comments. The morning came too early. Emma had dozed in the stiff hospital chair, only to wake with a kink in her neck and the smell of antiseptic in her nose. Across the room, Gabriel stood near the window, phone pressed to his ear, his voice clipped and sharp. No, I said the acquisition goes through. Delay is an option. Handle it, or I'll find someone who will. His tone was cold, calculated, the polished CEO masked back in place. Emma watched him, the warmth of last night's laughter a distant memory. When he hung up, she smiled faintly. So that's the real you. He turned, startled. What do you mean? The man who barks orders, who doesn't flinch when he threatens people's jobs. It's like you have two faces, one for me, one for everyone else. Gabriel's jaw tightened. You think you know me after a few hours of conversation? Emma hesitated, thrown by his sharpness. I mean, you have no idea what it takes to run an empire, he snapped. To keep everything from falling apart. You see a spoiled businessman. I see someone carrying the weight of hundreds of lives. Don't pretend you understand. His words landed like a slap. Emma straightened, heat rushing to her cheeks. You're right. I don't understand. But I do know you don't get to treat people like disposable tools. Not me. Not your employees. Not even your father. His eyes narrowed. Ah, there it is. There what is? The angle. The reason you're still here. His voice turned icy. You think I don't see it? A struggling waitress, suddenly wrapped up in a billionaire family drama. You're waiting for a payout. Or maybe something more. Emma's breath caught. Excuse me? You've been circling my father like a saint, feeding him, comforting him, making sure I notice. What is it you're after? Money? A promotion out of that greasy diner? Or are you aiming higher, me? Her chest tightened, fury and hurt battling in her throat. You arrogant! She stopped, swallowing hard. Do you really think kindness has a price tag? That every gesture needs to be bought? His silence was answer enough. Emma's hands trembled. I stayed because he needed someone. Because I know what abandonment feels like. Not because of you. Gabriel took a step closer, his voice low, but laced with venom. Everyone wants something from me, Emma. Don't pretend you're different. Her eyes burned with unshed tears. Maybe that's your problem. You've been rich and powerful so long you can't imagine anyone loving without strings attached. The tension was unbearable. The monitor beeped steadily beside Robert, the only witness to their unraveling. Emma grabbed her bag, standing abruptly. I'm done. Gabriel's mouth opened, but no words came out. She didn't give him the chance. The door slammed behind her, the echo reverberating in the sterile hall. Emma's footsteps pounded down the corridor, anger blurring into heartbreak. Her chest ached, not just from what he said, but from how much it mattered. She shouldn't care what Gabriel Pierce thought of her, and yet she did. She reached the exit, pushing into the cool autumn air. The city smelled of rain and exhaust, her breath fogging in the chill. She wrapped her arms around herself, wishing the warmth of last night's laughter hadn't been shattered so cruelly. Back upstairs, Gabriel stood frozen in the quiet room, staring at the empty chair Emma had left behind. His father stirred weakly, opening his eyes. Where's Emma? Robert asked, voice thin. Gabriel's throat worked. She left. The old man studied his son, disappointment flickering across his face. What did you do? Gabriel didn't answer. He didn't have to. Robert sighed, closing his eyes again. You'll lose more than a father if you keep pushing everyone away. The words cut deeper than Gabriel wanted to admit, but pride kept him silent, his chest tight with storm he couldn't name. For the first time in years, Gabriel Pierce, CEO, billionaire, untouchable, felt like a boy again, abandoned and angry, and utterly alone. Have you ever had someone completely misunderstand your intentions, and it broke something between you? Do you think Gabriel's words were unforgivable, or is there still hope? Drop your thoughts below. Emma sat on the edge of her bed that night, her apron still crumpled in her hands. She hadn't even bothered to change out of her work clothes after leaving the hospital. The city hummed faintly outside her window, sirens, laughter, the low growl of traffic. But inside, it was just her and the echo of Gabriel's words. What do you want? Money? Me? She closed her eyes, the sting still raw. How could he take something as pure as kindness and twist it into greed? But beneath the hurt was another ache. The memory of his laugh in the cafeteria, the way his eyes softened when he thought no one was looking. Somewhere in that guarded man, there was someone worth knowing. Emma pressed her palms to her face. Why do I even care? She whispered into the darkness. Because a voice inside answered, you saw his cracks, and you wanted to believe in the man beneath them. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, startling her. She glanced at the screen. A text from the hospital. Robert is asking for you. Her heart clenched. She should ignore it. She had no obligation to return, not after what Gabriel had accused her of. But the image of the frail old man, alone in that sterile room, pushed against her pride. With a heavy sigh, she stood. Just for him, she told herself. Not for Gabriel. For Robert. Meanwhile, across the city, Gabriel sat in his penthouse office, the skyline glittering like 1,000 temptations beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. But the power and wealth he had built felt strangely hollow tonight. His glass of scotch sat untouched on the desk. His reflection stared back at him from the window. Polished suit, perfect posture, everything he had fought to become. And yet, for the first time, he hated what he saw. Emma's words replayed in his head. Maybe that's your problem. You can't imagine anyone loving without strings attached. He raked a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. Why had he said those things? Why had he pushed her away when all she had shown was compassion? Because that's what he did. He built walls, not bridges. He pushed people out before they had the chance to leave him. And now she was gone. His phone buzzed. A message from the hospital. Emma came back. She's sitting with your father. Gabriel's chest tightened. She came back. After everything, she came back. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. Pride screamed at him to stay away. But something deeper, quieter, more desperate, whispered that if he let her slip through his fingers, he'd lose more than just her. He'd lose the chance to be the man his father believed he could still be. Emma sat by Robert's bedside, brushing a cool cloth across his forehead. His eyes opened slowly, weary but brightening when he saw her. "You came," he whispered. She smiled faintly. "Of course. Someone has to keep you out of trouble." He chuckled weakly, then winced. "Don't waste your kindness on a stubborn old man." "You're worth it," Emma said softly. His gaze lingered on her, searching. "And so is my son." Emma swallowed. "He doesn't want me there." Robert's hand trembled as he reached for hers. "He wants more than he knows how to ask for. Don't let his pride fool you. He's been abandoned too many times. He thinks pushing people away keeps him safe." Emma's eyes stung. "I don't know if I can get past what he said." Robert squeezed her hand weakly. "Then make him say something different." The door creaked open, and Emma turned sharply. Gabriel stood there, framed by the harsh hospital light. His suit jacket hung over one arm, his expression unguarded for once. Their eyes met. For a moment, neither moved. The silence was heavy, thick with everything unsaid. Then Gabriel stepped inside, setting his jacket on the chair. He looked at his father first, then at Emma. "I was wrong," he said simply. Emma blinked, startled. Gabriel's voice was low, but steady. "About you, about everything. I've spent so long assuming everyone has an angle that I couldn't see the truth when it was right in front of me." He exhaled, shaking his head. "You've shown my father more kindness than I have in years. And you did it without expecting anything back. I accused you of the one thing you never were." Emma's heart pounded, caught between hope and hurt. "I don't know how to fix it," Gabriel admitted, his gaze locking on hers. "But I don't want to lose the chance to try." The room was silent, except for the steady beep of the monitor. Emma studied him, searching his face for insincerity. For once, there was none. Just a man stripped bare, risking vulnerability for first time. Her lips parted, but no words came. Robert smiled faintly, his eyes drifting closed again. "About time," he murmured before sleep claimed him. "If someone hurt you deeply but came back with genuine humility, would you give them another chance? They'll do second chances heal or reopen wounds. Share your take in the comments." Morning sunlight spilled through the hospital window, soft and golden. Emma sat with a cup of coffee cooling between her hands, her thoughts a tangle of uncertainty. Gabriel's words from a night before still echoed in her chest. His apology, his vulnerability, the look in his eyes when he said he didn't want to lose the chance to try. She had wanted to believe him. A part of her still did. But trust was fragile, and she had learned the hard way that once broken wasn't so easily pieced back together. Robert stirred, his eyes opening slowly. He smiled when he saw her. "Still here." Emma nodded softly. "Still here." He looked around, searching. "And Gabriel?" Emma hesitated. "He went home last night, but he said things, honest things." Robert's smile widened faintly. "He's trying, then." She gave a small laugh. For a man who runs billion-dollar companies, he's surprisingly clumsy when it comes to feelings. Robert chuckled, then winced, his hand pressing to his chest. Emma reached for him immediately, but he waved her off. "Don't worry. Just old bones remembering they're old." His eyes softened. "You've done more for me than you'll ever know." And for him. Emma's gaze dropped. "I don't know if I can forgive him that easily." Robert squeezed her hand. Forgiveness isn't about ease. It's about deciding someone's worth the risk. And Emma, he's worth it. He just needs someone to remind him he is. Later that day, Gabriel returned. He looked less like the untouchable CEO and more like a man stripped of his armor. His tie was gone, his shirt slightly wrinkled, his expression uncertain. When he walked into the room, Emma rose instinctively, unsure of what to say. Gabriel spoke first. "Emma." Her name on his lips felt different this time, softer, almost reverent. "I know words aren't enough," he said quietly, "but I'll say them anyway. I'm sorry for doubting you, for pushing you away, for being too proud to see what was right in front of me." He exhaled, his hands flexing at his sides, as though he didn't know what to do with them. I want to be better. For my father. For myself. And maybe for you. Emma's chest tightened. She wanted to stay guarded. But the honesty in his voice chipped away at her walls. Gabriel, I don't expect you to forgive me overnight, he continued. But I'm asking for the chance to prove that I can be more than the man you saw yesterday. That I can be the man who laughed with you in the cafeteria. The man who, his voice faltered, who hasn't stopped thinking about you since the day you handed my father a bowl of soup. Her eyes stung, tears threatening. You really don't make this easy, do you? A faint smile tugged at his lips. Easy has never been my strength. Silence stretched, thick with everything unsaid. Then Emma shook her head, laughing softly through her tears. You're impossible. But, he asked, hope flickering. She met his gaze, her voice steady. But maybe you're worth the risk. Robert stirred then, his voice weak, but carrying a smile. Finally, they both turned toward him. Startled, he chuckled faintly. I can rest easy now. My son has found someone who sees past the suit. And Emma, you've given him back the piece of himself he thought was gone. Gabriel's throat worked, his eyes glistening as he finally reached for his father's hand. I've missed you, Dad. Robert's fingers curled weakly around his son's. I've missed you too, son. More than you'll ever know. Emma watched as father and son held hands, the years of silence breaking at last. It was imperfect, unfinished, but it was real. And for the first time, Gabriel looked less like the billionaire everyone feared and more like a boy who had finally come home. Weeks later, Robert was discharged, moving slowly but stronger than before. Emma helped settle him into a quiet rehab facility, where Gabriel visited daily. One evening, as Emma was leaving, Gabriel caught her at the door. Dinner, he said simply. She blinked. Excuse me, dinner. With me. Somewhere that isn't a hospital cafeteria. Emma arched an eyebrow. You're awfully confident I'll say yes. He smiled faintly. I'm not confident. I'm hopeful. Her lips curved despite herself. All right, but if you order the most expensive bottle of wine just to impress me, I'm walking out. He chuckled. Noted. The dinner was simple. An Italian restaurant tucked in a quiet corner of the city. No boardrooms. No waitstaff scurrying to impress. No way of power in the air. Just two people sharing pasta, laughter, and the kind of conversation that didn't need armor. Emma teased him about spilling sauce on his cuff. Gabriel admitted it was the best meal he'd had in years. Not because of the food, but because of her. When he walked her home that night, the city lights glimmering around them, Gabriel paused at her door. Emma? She turned, her breath catching at the vulnerability in his eyes. Thank you, he said softly, for seeing me, for staying when you had every reason to walk away, for teaching me that love isn't earned with money, but given with kindness. Her heart swelled, and for the first time, she let herself step closer, closing the distance between them. You're welcome, she whispered, and when his lips brushed hers, tentative, searching, it felt less like the start of something new and more like the return of something that had been waiting all along. The story that began with a waitress sliding a bowl of soup to a starving old man ended with love, reconciliation, and redemption. Proof that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness ripple outward, changing not just one life, but many. Emma had found a love she never expected. Gabriel had found the courage to forgive and to be forgiven. And Robert had found peace, knowing the family he thought was lost had been restored. Love, it turned out, had been waiting for them all, hidden in plain sight, in the simple act of kindness that started it all. Do you believe love often finds us when we least expect it? Or is it something we have to go out and chase? Share your stories. I'd love to hear how kindness or chance shaped your life. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss more stories like this. Your support helps us keep bringing these emotional journeys to life.